Okay, so this is the last section of this introduction to trig portion of the chapter, and the last thing we're going to be doing before break. Well, I guess that doesn't work. All right, I got to leave it like this. Okay, so we're going to solve some simple trig functions. Again, we did this at the beginning of the year, so hopefully this is just a review. Now, do pay attention to the domain limits. So here it says where 0 is less than theta is less than 180 degrees. So a couple of things. You're going to be writing your answers in degrees, okay? And since it's between 0 and 180 degrees, we are only going to be looking in the first two quadrants. Okay, so we want to know what angle measure is the sine 1/2. So sine is your y value of your coordinate. So look in quadrants 1 and 2, and you are looking for a y value of 1/2. Okay, so the first one I see is at 30 degrees. And you have a second angle in the second quadrant, and that's at 150 degrees. Okay, so B then, secant, is negative 1/2. All right, well, we don't have secant, but we have cosine. So cosine, the reciprocal would be a negative 1/2. So that's what we're looking for. Cosine is your x value, so your x coordinate. So look at your x's. You are looking for a negative 1/2. Okay, there is not going to be one in the first quadrant because remember all 6 trig functions are positive in the first quadrant, and this says cosine is negative. So in your second quadrant, you will find theta is 120 degrees, and that gives you an x value of negative 1/2. Okay, example 24. Solve for theta where 0 is less than theta is less than 2 pi. So 0 to 2 pi, we're going to do one complete rotation, and we're giving our answers in radian form. So do the same thing. So cosine is negative root 2 over 2. So again, you're looking for the x coordinate for cosine and being a negative root 2 over 2. And we've got all 4 quadrants to look in. Okay, but again, there's no point in looking in the first quadrant because everybody is positive in the first. And cosine is positive in the fourth. So we're going to find our angles in the second and third quadrant. So negative root 2 over 2 is 3 pi over 4. So there's that first measure. And in the third quadrant, we have 5 pi over 4. Again, I'm giving my answers in radian measure because my domain was given to me in terms of pi. Okay, B, secant of theta equals negative 2 root 3 over 3. Okay, so again, I don't have secant on my unit circle, but the reciprocal of secant is cosine. So I'm going to be looking for the cosine and then do the reciprocal. So it's going to be negative 3 over 2 root 3. Okay, well, that you are not going to find on the unit circle. So the secant had to have been rationalized to get that root 3 in the numerator. So what I can do here is I can rationalize this and go root 3 over root 3. And then when I simplify, I'll have some reducing. So negative 3 root 3 over, this would be 6. So if I simplify that, I get negative root 3 over 2. So that's actually what I'm going to look for. I'm going to look for the negative root 3 over 2. So, and cosine is negative in the second and third quadrant. So I'm looking in the second and third quadrant again. In second quadrant, I find 5 pi over 6. And then in the third quadrant, x coordinate of negative root 3 over 2, that's a 7 pi over 6. So those are actually the angle measures that I'm looking for. Okay, so now 25, I'm not going to be using my unit circle on this one because it's given to me in decimal form, and everything I have on my unit circle is exact form, and it's not like a 0.5 where I know that's a 1/2. Okay, so this is just going to be a random angle measure somewhere on my circle. Again, we switch back to degrees, so we're going to be using degrees, and get your calculator out again. Now remember, I was in radians before, so I need to go to my mode and go down and switch to degrees. Okay, so here we can go inverse sine. This is going to be inverse sine of 0.304. So second sine 0.304, and I get about 19, we'll go 19.9 degrees. Okay, so 19.9 degrees. So there's an answer. However, I am not finished yet, because go back to our all snow tastes cold. The sign is positive, and the sign is positive in 2 quadrants. So this, you're going to have an angle measure in the first quadrant and in the second quadrant. So the 19.9 is my angle measure in the first quadrant. I have to find the one in the second quadrant. Okay, well, we talked about reference angles the other day, and that's where these come into play. So first quadrant, okay, my theta, that's my 19.9 degrees. So I want a reference angle of 19.9 degrees, and I want it in the second quadrant. Okay, so that's a reference angle of 19.9. So I'd figure out what this angle is. Well, it's going to be 180 minus 19.9 degrees. So that looks like 160.1 degree angle. Okay, so there's my 2 angle measures, my 19.9 and then also my 160.1. Okay, I'm going to be doing the same thing on the tangent, and the tangent is negative. So all snow tastes cold. Well, tangent is going to be negative in the second quadrant, and it's going to be negative in the fourth quadrant. So we're going to be looking for 2 angles again. So we'll go second tangent and negative 2.4, close parenthesis. Okay, now this time it gave me a negative 67.4. Okay, so we'll say theta is negative 67.4 degrees. Okay, so a couple of things. I'm looking for a positive angle measure from 0 to 360. So a negative 67.4 is not in that domain. So I need to figure out another way to say negative 67.4, and that's going to be going counterclockwise around your axes to get a positive angle measure. So I would need to add 360 degrees. Okay, remember we talked about coterminal angles. This is where we need that skill. So instead of a negative 67.4, if I add 360, so go plus 360, 292.6. So 292.6 degrees. So there's my angle measure in the fourth quadrant. Okay, now we also have an angle in the second quadrant. Okay, so, All right. So in the second quadrant, that 67.4 is going to be the reference angle. So here, this is that 67.4 degrees. So again, what is this angle? Okay. So I'm going to do 180 minus 67.4 degrees. So 180 minus 67.4, 112. So this is a 112.6 degree angle measure. Okay, so when, kind of to back up, so when we did the inverse tangent of the negative 2.4, it gives you a reference angle. Okay, so that was that 67.4. It was a reference angle. We then needed to use that reference angle, put it in the fourth quadrant, figure out a coterminal, a positive coterminal angle that would be representative of that negative 67.4 degrees. And then we used that same angle and used it as a reference angle in the second quadrant. And that's how we got the 112.6 degrees. Okay, that is it for this lesson. You have review that you can work on, and there's an answer key posted. Don't forget, you also have your problem set that's due on Friday, so be sure that you are working on that.